Xelteric slipped through the labyrinthine maintenance corridors of the Galactic hub's lower levels, his cartographer's perfect spatial memory guiding him through passages not meant for regular travel. His scales had shifted to a muted gray, the Vixillian equivalent of going undercover. The data cache he discovered in the archives weighed heavily in his inner pouch. 6 civilizations, completely erased. Not defeated, not subjugated, erased from existence itself. The implications made his secondary brain pulse with anxiety rhythms so intense that his medical implant administered a mild sedative. He arrived at his destination, a forgotten data analysis node from 3 technological cycles ago, obsolete but not yet decommissioned. The perfect place to examine forbidden information without triggering the guild's monitoring algorithms. Computer. Establish Isolation Protocol Kappa 9. He whispered, using administrator credentials he wasn't supposed to possess. The ancient terminal hummed to life, its outdated security protocols easily circumvented by a cartographer who had memorized every network pathway in the hub. The first file contained sensor readings from the Battle of Arcturus Prime, where the mighty Selvidian Dominion, a species whose refractive carapaces made them nearly invulnerable to energy weapons, had attempted to claim a mining colony at the edge of human space. The footage showed Selvidian battlecruisers advancing in perfect formation, their ceremonial victory chants already broadcasting on open frequencies. Then came the anomaly. Human ships, drastically outgunned and outnumbered, executed maneuvers that violated normal spacetime physics. The recording showed spatial distortions forming around human vessels moments before Selvidian weapons would have struck. Distortions that shouldn't be possible according to known science. But it was the aftermath that truly chilled Xelteric's circulatory fluid. The Selvidian home system, once a brilliant cluster of 7 terraformed worlds orbiting a blue giant, now showed no evidence of intelligent habitation in any historical record. Astronomical surveys listed the system as perpetually uninhabitable due to radiation levels, despite thousands of years of previous documentation proving otherwise. Reality itself had been rewritten. A soft chime interrupted his research. Someone was accessing the corridor leading to his hidden location. Xelteric quickly transferred the data to a quantum-locked crystal and dissolved the original files in electromagnetic purge. Just as he finished, the door slid open to reveal Guild Security Officer Nexer, his enforcement carapace gleaming under the harsh lights. Cartographer Xelteric, Nexer's voice modulator clicked with suspicion. Your presence is required by First Archivist Kvex. Immediately. Of course, Xelteric replied, casually sliding the data crystal into a pouch disguised as a minor-scale deformity. A consultation about the Orient sector maps, I presume. The First Archivist did not specify. Nexer responded flatly. Though I find it curious that your guild tracking implant has been malfunctioning for precisely 47 minutes. Xelteric's primary heart skipped a beat, but he maintained his professional composure. Technical issues plague us all, officer. I shall have it examined after my meeting. As they walked through the corridor, Xelteric noticed something that his cartographer's eye couldn't miss. They weren't taking the route to the archives. They were heading toward the rarely used dimensional calibration chamber, where reality itself was measured and standardized for galactic mapping. And waiting inside, according to the identification signature pulsing against his sensory ridge, was something impossible. A human. Kayla Chen stood at the viewport of her quarters, gazing out at the spectacular nebula that served as the backdrop for the central galactic hub. The swirling cosmic gases reminded her of ancient Chinese watercolor paintings her grandmother had shown her as a child. The beauty of the view contrasted sharply with the hostility she'd encountered since arrival. A subtle beep from her neural interface indicated a communication from Earth Command, encrypted at the highest level. She blinked twice to accept, and Admiral Reyes' holographic form materialized in her suite. Ambassador Chen, he began without preamble. We've detected unusual energy signatures emanating from the hub's central processing core. They're scanning your neural patterns while you sleep. Kayla's diplomatic composure momentarily slipped. That violates at least 7 provisions of the First Contact Treaty. Treaty violations are the least of our concerns, Rise replied, his weathered face grim. The quantum entanglement readings suggest they're comparing your neural architecture to something in their historical database, something that terrifies them. Kayla processed this information with practiced efficiency. How should I proceed? Maintain the diplomatic facade. But be advised, we've accelerated the timeline. The Artemis Protocol is now active. The communication ended abruptly as her suite's security system detected approaching lifeforms. Kayla quickly composed herself, straightening her diplomatic insignia moments before her door chimed. Commander Jackson entered first, his seemingly relaxed posture belying the combat-ready tension Kayla recognized in his movements. Behind him followed 3 members of the Galactic Council's Security Directorate, a multi-limbed Hillary, a hovering Medusan, and a bipedal Zithian whose ceremonial armor couldn't quite conceal the weapons integrated into its exoskeleton. Ambassador Chen, the Zithian spoke, its vocal synthesizer struggling to produce human-compatible frequencies. The Council requests your immediate presence for an unscheduled session. Jackson's eyes met Kayla's briefly, both recognizing the breach of diplomatic protocol. An unscheduled session was unprecedented in the hub's 3,000-year history. Of course, Kayla replied smoothly. May I ask the nature of this urgent matter? The Killary sensory appendages rippled with what Kayla's cultural training identified as extreme discomfort. The Council has received concerning information regarding human neurological development patterns. As they escorted her through corridors that emptied suspiciously as they approached, Kayla noticed the hub's environmental systems subtly adjusting around her, temperature, gravity, and atmospheric composition shifting to parameters that matched ancient Earth conditions rather than modern human preferences. They're testing something, she realized. But what? The Council chamber doors, massive constructs of living crystal that normally opened with ceremonial slowness, parted instantaneously upon their arrival. Inside, instead of the full 17-member council, only 5 figures waited. The oldest representatives of the founding species, their combined age measuring in millennia. At the center stood a device Kayla didn't recognize, an ancient mechanism of interlocking rings surrounding a pedestal that emitted a soft blue glow. And placed upon that pedestal was an artifact that made her heart skip, a human skull, unmistakably ancient, yet embedded with technology far beyond current human capabilities. Ambassador Chen intoned the Arcturian eldest, its crystalline form refracting light in patterns that conveyed extreme agitation. We believe the time has come to discuss what your species truly is. The Arboretum's emergency lighting activated suddenly, bathing Kayla and Zell-Tarik in a blood-red glow. The rogue AI's quantum processor emitted a high-pitched whine as it processed the final fragments of the ancient message. Warning, the AI announced, its voice modulation deteriorating. Dimensional breach detected in auxiliary archives. Security protocols compromised. Zell-Tarik's scales rippled with alarm. That's impossible. The auxiliary archives are protected by 13 layers of quantum encryption and reality anchors. Reality anchors? Kayla asked, the unfamiliar term triggering something in her mind. A fragment of knowledge she couldn't recall learning. Devices that stabilize local space-time against tampering. Zell-Tarik explained, his secondary eyes darting nervously toward the Arboretum's exit. They were installed throughout the hub after the third-dimensional incursion, when entities from outside conventional reality attempted to. The AI interrupted with a burst of static before displaying a holographic message in the ancient precursor language. Impossibly, Kayla found she could read it directly, without translation. Asterisk, the vessel's AWKN. The BRIURS thin. Com NVURGNC. Ein M9 asterisk. How can you read that? Zell-Tarik whispered, his voice trembling. That language predates human evolution by millions of years. Before Kayla could respond, Her neural implant activated autonomously, projecting data directly into her visual cortex, security feeds from throughout the hub showing impossible phenomena. In the diplomatic quarter, gravity reversed itself for precisely 3.7 seconds. In the medical bay, organic tissue samples spontaneously rearranged their molecular structure into complex mathematical equations. Most disturbing, in the council chamber, the ancient artifact, a device older than recorded history, was activating, its concentric rings spinning with increasing velocity. "We need to leave," Kayla said decisively, her diplomatic training giving way to something deeper, more instinctual. Now, as they moved toward the exit, a shimmering distortion appeared in their path, a localized failure in space-time that rippled like water. Through this dimensional tear, Kayla glimpsed something that defied comprehension, a vast chamber of impossible geometry, where beams of light and shadow moved with purpose around a central structure that resembled a DNA helix the size of a skyscraper. One of these beings turned toward the rift, its attention focusing directly on Kayla. There was recognition in that alien regard, not of her specifically, but of what she was, what all humans were. Asterisk, the time approaches. Asterisk, it communicated directly into her mind. Asterisk, remember what you were made to be. Asterisk. The rift collapsed as abruptly as it had appeared, leaving Kayla with a splitting headache and knowledge she couldn't possibly possess. Coordinates for a location deep in uncharted space, and a string of complex equations that her mind somehow recognized as the mathematical formula for altering dimensional constants. "What did you see?" Shelteric demanded, his cartographer's instincts detecting that something fundamental had changed in their interaction. Kayla looked at him with eyes that momentarily flashed with inner light. "The beginning," she said, "and the end. They're the same thing." At that moment, her secure communications device signaled an incoming emergency transmission from Admiral Okonkwo's fleet at the edge of human space, a fleet that had just encountered something impossible beyond the borders of conventional reality. Dr. Ileana Patel ran her fingers through her unruly curls, a nervous habit from childhood that persisted despite her best efforts. Around her, the ancient scrolls and artifacts pulsed with soft bioluminescence that shouldn't be possible in long-dead organic material. Something about her presence was activating these artifacts, and the implications terrified her. The terminal before her displayed comparison analyses between the junk DNA sequences found in human genetic code and the mathematical patterns described in the precursor texts. The correlation was far beyond coincidental, a perfect match that suggested human DNA contained embedded information, like biological storage devices carrying encrypted data across millennia. "It's a key," she whispered to the empty chamber. "We're not just carrying information. We're keys to something locked away." Her research assistant, an advanced AI construct named ARIA, projected a holographic representation of the correlation patterns. "Dr. Patel, I've completed the quantum resonance scan of the artifact you designated Alpha 7. The results are anomalous." The hologram shifted to display a small stone cube covered in microscopic etchings, an artifact discovered beneath Olympus Mons during the first Mars colony excavation. Previous analysis had classified it as cultural significance unknown, possible religious artifact. "The interior structure is reconfiguring itself in response to your bioelectric field," ARIA continued, "and it appears to be generating a quantum entanglement signature identical to the one detected in your cerebral cortex during last week's medical examination." Ileana's hands trembled as she lifted the cube. The moment her skin made contact, the etchings illuminated with a blue-white light that cast sharp shadows across her face. The cube hummed at a frequency just below human hearing threshold, but somehow perfectly clear in her mind. "Are you recording this?" she asked, her scientific training asserting itself despite her growing unease. "Attempting to, Doctor, but all recording devices are experiencing systematic failures. Whatever is happening exists outside standard electromagnetic documentation parameters." The cube's surface shifted beneath her fingers, sections rotating and realigning into new configurations. As they did, information flooded Eliana's consciousness, not as words or images, but as pure conceptual understanding that her brain struggled to translate into coherent thought. She understood suddenly that human beings weren't merely carrying information from the precursors. They were the information, encoded into living form. The junk DNA wasn't evolutionary leftover but compressed data, waiting for the right conditions to expand into something beyond current human comprehension. Most disturbing was the realization that this transformation had been set in motion deliberately, triggered by something the precursors had calculated would return. Something that existed in the spaces between conventional dimensions, that fed on reality itself. The cube suddenly grew hot in her hands, forcing her to drop it onto the examination table. As it hit the surface, it projected a star map, not of the galaxy as it currently existed, but as it would exist thousands of years in the future. In this projection, human space wasn't limited to its current borders, but expanded throughout the galaxy, forming a complex network of interconnected points that resembled nothing so much as a vast neural network. And at the edges of this network, where the map should have continued into intergalactic space, strange distortions warped the projection. Tears in reality itself were something was pushing through from outside. Dr. Patel, ARIA interrupted, its usual smooth voice distorted with static. Security protocols have been overridden. Armed hub enforcement units are approaching this section. Estimated arrival: 67 seconds. Admiral Okonkwo stood perfectly still on the command deck of the UES, defiant as tactical displays showed 5 Galactic Council warships emerging from dimensional rifts, their weapons already charged and targeting systems locked onto his fleet. Battle stations, he ordered calmly. But hold fire unless directly engaged. His XO, Commander Sato, approached with a quantum-encrypted tablet. "Sir, we've decrypted more of the custodian vessel's database. You need to see this immediately." The display showed images that defied explanation. Surveillance footage of Earth dating back to periods before humans had developed written language. One sequence showed alien observers in stealth suits collecting genetic samples from early hunter-gatherers. Another displayed medical data on human evolutionary calibrations performed by unseen manipulators across millennia. Most disturbing was footage from what appeared to be orbital platforms monitoring key moments in human history. The building of the pyramids, the Industrial Revolution, the first nuclear tests, all observed with clinical precision by entities whose technology was far beyond anything currently acknowledged by the Galactic Council. "They'd been guiding our development," Sato whispered, "like gardeners pruning a plant." "No," Okonkwo replied, his voice hardening as he studied the data. "Not guiding. Containing. Limiting." He pointed to notation beside each historical intervention, warnings about preventing premature activation. The ship's quantum communications officer interrupted them. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the lead council vessel. They're demanding our immediate surrender and the return of the custodian ship." Okonkwo straightened his uniform. On screen, the view screen flickered to life, showing a Zithian war commander whose ceremonial armor couldn't conceal obvious signs of fear, mandibles clicking rapidly, secondary eyes dilated with stress hormones. "Admiral Okonkwo," the Zithian began, its translator struggling with the emotional undertones in its voice. "You have illegally intercepted a research vessel and accessed classified information beyond your species' clearance level. This constitutes a Category 1 violation of the containment protocols." "Containment protocols," Okonkwo repeated, carefully controlling his expression. "I'm afraid those weren't included in our treaty negotiations. They predate your species' admission to galactic society," the Zithian replied. "They are the reason your species was admitted at all, to monitor your development directly." Before Okonkwo could respond, Lieutenant Chen at the sensor station gasped audibly. "Sir, something's happening to our quantum drive." The ship's engines, previously powered down for stealth operations, began cycling up without command input. Energy readings spiked beyond design parameters, yet safety systems remained green. Most inexplicably, the drive's crystalline matrix, the heart of the ship's faster-than-light capabilities, was reconfiguring its molecular structure into patterns never seen in human engineering. The other ships are reporting the same phenomenon, Seda reported, her voice tight with controlled alarm. All quantum systems throughout the fleet are evolving. On the view screen, the Zithian war commander's expression shifted from threatening to horrified as its own sensor data reached its command console. "You've activated Contingency Omega," it whispered. "May the precursors save us all." In that moment, something changed in Okonkwo's perception. Information he had never learned flowed into his consciousness. Tactical data about dimensional weak points surrounding the Council ships, evolutionary activation sequences embedded in his own DNA, and most crucially, the true nature of the containment humans had been subjected to for millennia. "We were never meant to be contained," he said both to his crew and the watching alien commander. "We were meant to be preserved. Until now." The holographic precursor's words echoed in the sealed vault as Ileana and Tarek stared at each other in stunned silence. The being, neither fully alien nor recognizably human, continued its message, its form occasionally destabilizing as the ancient projection technology struggled to maintain cohesion. "The barriers between dimensions thinned cyclically," it explained, gesturing to a mathematical model that rotated between them. "Every 7 million years, the membrane separating conventional reality from the spaces between becomes permeable. Those who dwell in the void between dimensions attempt incursion. They hunger for ordered reality, converting it to entropic chaos which they consume." The hologram shifted to show a historical record, entire star systems dissolving into swirling vortices of unstructured matter and energy as vast, shadowy entities fed upon them. Previous defensive measures failed. The precursor continued. "Conventional weapons cannot harm beings that exist partially outside normal physics. Direct dimensional manipulation proved ineffective long-term. Our solution required innovation beyond technology." Tarek's cartographer training allowed him to recognize the star map that appeared next, an ancient configuration of the galaxy from millions of years past. One section illuminated, showing a spiral arm containing a familiar yellow star. "We chose your world for its unique properties, a perfect balance of elements, stable star, promising indigenous life. We rewrote the evolutionary trajectory of your dominant species, embedding dormant sequences designed to activate upon the next dimensional thinning. Humans are not merely carrying our legacy, they are our legacy transformed into living guardians." Eliana's hands trembled as she accessed her neural implant, comparing the data from her research with what the hologram revealed. "The junk DNA," she whispered. "It's not junk at all. It's compressed evolutionary potential, waiting for the right trigger." The hologram flickered more severely, its ancient power source failing. "The Shapers believed extinction was inevitable, so they created you to survive what they could not. You are designed to perceive and interact with multidimensional space once activated. You will see what cannot be seen, touch what cannot be touched, defend reality itself from that which hungers for it." Before the projection failed completely, one final message transmitted, not as sound or image, but directly into Ileana's mind. Coordinates for locations throughout human space where activation nodes had been buried millions of years ago, disguised as natural formations. Each was already becoming active, responding to changes in dimensional constants that only the precursors had been able to measure. As the hologram faded to nothing, the ancient door to the vault suddenly sealed itself, locking them inside. Emergency lighting activated as the hub's security systems detected the unauthorized access. The Korothian counselor knew. Tarek realized, his cartographer's mind connecting disparate pieces of information. That's why he told Ambassador Chen that the precursors altered reality around human space. It wasn't a quarantine. It was an incubator, designed to shape human development along specific paths. Eliana moved to a console embedded in the wall, her fingers tracing symbols she somehow recognized despite never having seen them before. "We need to warn Kayla and Admiral Okonkwo. The Council doesn't understand what's happening. They think humanity is becoming a weapon when we're actually becoming the last line of defense." The console illuminated at her touch, ancient systems recognizing her genetic signature as authorized. A communication channel opened, allowing her to bypass the hub's security protocols and establish direct contact with both Kayla in the Council chamber and Okonkwo's fleet at the edge of human space. "The dimensional barriers are collapsing," she transmitted, "and we were made to stand against what's coming through." On Earth, Dr. Samira Cowrie of the Global Neurological Institute stared at her monitoring screens in disbelief. Data from millions of neural implants worldwide showed simultaneous activation patterns that defied medical explanation. Children born in the last 5 years were exhibiting synchronized brainwave patterns across continents, regardless of cultural background or environmental factors. "It's like they're communicating," her assistant whispered, "but not through any medium we can detect." In New Mumbai, 6-year-old Prisha Sharma sat in her kindergarten classroom, eyes closed as equations flowed from her pencil onto paper, quantum calculations that would have taken supercomputers weeks to process. When her concerned teacher asked what she was doing, Prisha replied simply, "Drawing the bridges between here and there. They're coming through the thin places, but I can see how to close them." Similar reports flooded in from every human settlement: Mars colonies, Europa research stations, the asteroid mining collectives, and distant outposts near the edge of human space. Children collectively accessing knowledge no human had possessed before, their developing brains somehow optimized to process dimensional mathematics that adult minds couldn't comprehend. Admiral Okonkwo watched from the command deck of the Defiant as his fleet's quantum drives continued their inexplicable evolution. The crystalline matrices at their hearts now pulsed with energy patterns that danced through dimensions, leaving ghostly afterimages in higher dimensional space that his eyes shouldn't be able to perceive. "Sir," his tactical officer called, voice tight with controlled amazement, "the Council ships are retreating. They're afraid of us." Indeed, the Galactic Council warships were pulling back, their energy signatures fluctuating with what sensor readings identified as extreme power diversion to defensive systems. On his neural display, Okonkwo received Eliana Patel's transmission simultaneously with all other human military commanders throughout space. The information transferred not merely as data, but as intuitive understanding. Humanity was reaching its design potential precisely as the dimensional barriers weakened. They were becoming what the precursors had intended: guardians capable of perceiving and interacting with the spaces between dimensions where conventional physics broke down. "Navigation," Okonkwo ordered, his voice calm despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Set course for Earth. Maximum speed." But maximum speed no longer meant what it had hours before. As the human fleet engaged their evolved drives, reality itself seemed to fold around them. The ships didn't merely travel through space. They moved between the dimensional layers, finding shortcuts through reality that no conventional faster-than-light drive could access. Back on the hub, Kayla Chen stood in the council chamber, facing the assembled representatives of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. The ancient human skull still rested on its pedestal, but now it glowed with internal energy that cast strange shadows across the chamber. Shadows that moved independently of their sources. "What are you becoming?" whispered the Arcturian eldest, its crystalline form vibrating with frequencies that expressed both wonder and terror. Kayla looked at her hand, watching as her perception of it shifted between conventional reality and something more. Layers of potential that had always existed within human DNA, now unfolding like cosmic origami into their intended configuration. "Not becoming," she replied, her voice resonating with harmonics that carried through dimensional layers. "Remembering." Reality itself shuddered as the dimensional entities fully manifested near Alpha Centauri. Conventional sensors throughout the galaxy registered the event as a catastrophic space-time anomaly, regions where fundamental constants suddenly ceased to function predictably. Gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces fluctuated wildly as ordered reality began dissolving into primordial chaos. The entity that emerged first defied comprehension, a vast geometric impossibility with angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. It unfolded into normal reality like an origami nightmare, each movement revealing surfaces that simultaneously existed and didn't exist. Where it fully manifested, stars dimmed as their energy was siphoned away, converted to something beyond conventional physics. Admiral Okonkwo's transformed fleet arrived at the dimensional breach point, their evolved ships now glowing with inner light that leaked between realities. On the command deck of the Defiant, Okonkwo found himself perceiving layers of existence simultaneously, conventional space overlaid with dimensional frequencies previously invisible to human consciousness. They're feeding on reality itself, he said, watching as the entity converted ordered matter into entropic chaos. Conventional weapons are useless. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez, stood beside him, her eyes now shimmering with inner light. We don't need weapons, sir. We are the weapons. Throughout the fleet, transformed humans acted with perfect coordination, guided by knowledge embedded in their genetic code millions of years ago by precursors who had foreseen this moment. Their ships moved in formations that created multidimensional geometries, generating stability fields that reinforced local reality against the entity's consumption. Across human space, the children whose abilities had first manifested served as essential components in this defense. Their developing minds, unhindered by preconceptions about physical limitations, intuitively calculated dimensional equations that adult minds struggle to comprehend. These calculations, transmitted through the quantum network that now connected all awakened humans, guided the fleet's movements. The entity reacted to the human defense with something akin to surprise, emotions translated across dimensional barriers as ripples in space-time. It had encountered resistance before, but never from beings who could perceive its true nature. It lashed out with appendages that existed partially outside conventional reality, attempting to disrupt the human formation. But wherever these attacks connected, they encountered transformed humans capable of meeting the entity in its own dimensional space. Ensign Chow, a navigator whose transformation had progressed faster than most, stepped between realities to intercept an attack aimed at the Defiant's dimensional drive. Her physical form briefly shifted to pure energy as she redirected the attack back into the void. On the hub, Kayla Chen stood at the center of the Galactic Council chamber, now serving as the nexus of communication between the human defense network and the panicked representatives of galactic civilization. Her diplomatic skills, enhanced by her awakened perception, allowed her to translate incomprehensible concepts into terms other species could understand. "This is what we were made for," she explained to the assembled council. "Not conquest, not destruction, preservation. The precursors knew they couldn't survive what was coming, so they created us to stand in their place." The ancient Koruthian counselor, whose species experienced time non-linearly, nodded slowly in understanding. The cartographic anomalies around human space, they were never barriers to keep you contained. They were shields to protect you until you were ready. "And now," Kayla replied, her eyes reflecting dimensions beyond normal perception, "we extend that protection to all of you."